All right, welcome back, guys. We are once again doing the Python Learn With Me series. We are going over the Python Crash Course book. We are on chapter 4, and we are now on example 14. So this one is a little different, as you can probably see by the screen I'm on. Just gonna move my camera a little bit over so you guys can see a little bit better. So what example 14 is wanting us to do is to look over this PEP style guide for Python code. So if you don't have the book, what this section is basically asking you or telling you about is this style guide for Python code. So the idea behind it is that Python code is read a lot more than it is written. Only one person at a time typically is writing the base code, or if you have like a project group, only a few people at a time are writing it. But as soon as you put this code out or you share it with other people, multiple people, including yourself and the other people working on the code, will be reading it. And so a style guide is a general guideline for everybody to get on the same page and to be able to read code very easily. So all it really wants you to do is kind of skim through this style guide, and it's pretty lengthy, so you don't have to read the whole thing all in one sitting. Just know that this is going to be the style guide for this book and also for any other Python code that you might want to use in the future. And now it does go over some examples of when you might not want to use the style code. And for the most part, we will be using that style code. So because we are not going to be reading through this in this video, that was all of example 14. Wasn't much of an example. So we're going to switch over to our code for example 15. So for example 15, what it wants us to do is choose 3 of the programs we've already written in this chapter and modify each one to comply with PEP8. That's going to be that Python style guide. So the first thing it wants us to do is modify these to use 4 spaces for each indentation level to set our text editor to insert 4 spaces every time you press the tab key. And if you haven't already done so, see Appendix B for how to do that. So Appendix B is within this book. So all that's really saying, you might notice that we've changed editors. That's just because brackets, this one that we were previously using, doesn't give you easy access to set those things up, or at least I do not know how to do them. So we are using VS Code, and it more easily gives us access to all of our settings. So to do that, we're going to come down to this little area down here with the little cog, head into settings, and one of the first things you're going to see is how to edit this tab size. So it's already set to 4, so every time I press my tab key, it is going to add 4 spaces, which is congruent with the PEP8 style guide. The next thing it wants you to do is to add a vertical line that you can see where it, if I go back to this vertical line right here, this basically indicates where 80 characters is. So each of these lines should never be longer than 80 characters. So it should be, in essence, 79 characters per line. So you don't want to go past this line. And you can see as I extend this, it is going to move about that line. So I can obviously go way past this line if I really wanted to, but to remain compliant with the style guide, we're going to leave it there. And to change that in settings, we come up to this little type box, type in rulers, and you come down here where you see editor rulers, and you're just going to open this up, and it's going to give you this argument here, and it's going to automatically place you into this line. So what you're going to want to do is just add in 80 followed by a comma, and then you're just going to save that file using Control S. So we're not going to save it because I already have it set. So if I were to open this up, it would change the file. So I'm not going to save it again. So we can close out of that. And now we have our proper PEP, or at least to this point, PEP settings enabled. So now we're going to go through and pick three different projects that we did, and we're going to update it to be compliant with the code. So I'm going to pause here and pick out the first one. Okay, so I've chosen the 11th example as the first code, I guess, to fix and add it to the PEP style. So everything is already well under the 80 character limit. But the other thing that this example wants us to do is not use blank lines excessively. This makes it a little bit harder to understand. So in between different parts of the code like this, I think it's acceptable, but all within here, it should be condensed a little bit so that we can more easily read this code. Wow, I don't think that this looks very neat. For some people, it might be a little bit easier to read. So in between these things, I'm actually going to add a line here just because I think it might be a little bit. And I'm also going to add a line here and comment this out where I'm making a duplicate list. I'm going to add a little bit of a space here just because I think this makes it easier to read. This all feels to me as one section of an action, whereas this feels more like a separate action, just as I did about this section where I have two different output statements. I wanted to keep these separate so that you know that this is all different things. So that's what I did here. I put my outputs on a separate subsection, I guess you could call it. And I kept the list and the editing to the list in a different one. Right? So I'm going to pick out another one and we're going to update that to the PEP style as well. Right? So not too far away. I decided to go with example 12. I think these can be grouped together. These are all outputs. So I'm going to leave that in one section. I'm also going to take away that little blank space because all of this has to do with creating the list or editing the list. So in some way is dealing with the list. So technically I could add another space here and comment out that this is the output section, but I'm not going to do that since this is all one piece of code. So I'm going to pick another one and meet you guys back. All right, so I went back to example 1. So this one I feel like is unnecessarily spaced out. I don't think I really need this comment here, nor do I need this blank space. If anything, this is the only statement that I feel should be on its own separate line since it is slightly different from the output of this. The purpose of this output is to just name everything in the list, while this one is to summarize the entirety of the code. So normally in a longer code, this summary statement would go at the very bottom, while there would be multiple sections like this. So that's going to be it. In this one, we went over both example 14 and 15, but all we really did was skim over the PEP8 guidelines, and we went through exercise 15 where we went back and edited a few different codes to match the style lines. We added in our 80 character vertical line to tell us where 80 characters in. So just to show what that does, I'm just going to enter in a bunch of gibberish into my keyboard. So this will be where we reach that 80 line, and you can see that we do go over it. So anytime it reaches this, we should be indenting so that we end up on, or I mean below, that 80 character list, and we can continue on writing code. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to save all of these codes that we edited today. So I'm gonna save that, and save that. So now these have been updated to the PEP8 guidelines. If you found this helpful, give this video a like, share it with someone, and if you really want, subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next chapter. We will be starting chapter 5 and be going over if statements a little bit more in depth.